Welcome to part 9 of the 2018 NFL Draft in Review. Today we will be taking a look at the 2018 Jacksonville Jaguars draft, which is a considerable part of why the Jaguars completely crashed from a dominant defense, almost getting to the Super Bowl. A Super Bowl I believe they would have won, to being the worst team in the NFL 2 years in a row, some of the worst coaching imaginable in that time frame, with just endless head cases in the players, a lot of upheaval in the offense, and overall just poor management that resulted in a rebuild that shouldn't have happened. The one that appears to be going well enough, as they have won a playoff game since then. And so we will begin with their first pick, defensive tackle Taven Bryan. Now, Taven Bryan has never really been worth the pick they spent on him. He's only recently become a starter since moving to the Cleveland Browns this past year, where he did okay, but I really wouldn't consider him a integral part of that defense. I expected that he could be a pretty good pass rusher despite being a defensive tackle, and well, he's had 8.5 sacks through his career, so didn't quite blossom where I expected him to. Doesn't really get involved in fumbles, not a guy who swats down a lot of passes. He does get a lot of quarterback hits, but the ball's usually gone. And the tackle numbers don't suggest that he's particularly important in the run-stuffing game. So, overall, he didn't really pan out in Jacksonville. We'll see if Cleveland keeps him around. I don't really expect too great in terms of things from him in the future, but we'll see. Next up, we have the 61st selection, another player who's no longer with the Jaguars, wide receiver DJ Chark, and I will say that I am pretty okay with how Chark has turned out, because while I did like him when he was picked, I have spent a good 2 or 3 years telling people that this guy is not a number one receiver. Been getting clowned on for most of that, and, well, as we see with the statistics, tell me this guy's a number one receiver. One season above a 66 or a 60% catch radius. Wasn't even above that by much. 61.9 in 2019. When he was, for once, healthy and getting the Lions' share of targets. And then we just go through the rest of his stat line. He's only done better than 5 touchdowns once. He's only done better than 55 catches once. He's only done better than 13 games played once. There's a lot of injuries here. There's a lot of flashing the talent, but not consistently showing it, not consistently putting it to work, not consistently helping your team to win games. And, well, in spite of this, he is the one player from that class that I have seen fit to pull some highlights for, because no one else has turned into a starter or been bad enough to be ridiculed. So here we go, with his past year with Detroit for what limited effect he got the Lions. Like I said, he is pretty good. He seems to be pretty good for that underneath target, occasional home run hitter type of playmaker. So, but the Lions, they're stacked up right now. They have got a lot of targets in that building. They've actually got rid of T.J. Hockenson, and I wouldn't have faulted them for that if they didn't trade him inside the NFC North. What the hell? Why would you trade him to a team you have to play twice a season? Was that really the team offering the most for him? So, like I say, the talent is obvious, but the problems are just as obvious. That this guy is going to be a number 2 receiver probably the rest of his career because he just doesn't flourish enough to be a number 1 guy. He has the talent, but he doesn't have the health or any other real attributes that, make a guy a stable number 1. So, we'll see what he can do. If Detroit would be smart to keep him around, at the very least until they can say for sure if their latest draft pick at the position can be better than him or not. But I don't think the Lions are the last uniform we're going to see a DJ Chark put on. Something tells me that there's going to be a lot more bouncing around to come in his future. So, yeah. But like I said, to everybody that was harping at me for not calling this guy number 1 receiver, just keep trying that. It turned out real well for y'all. Next up, we have offensive tackle Will Richardson. We have safety Ronnie Harrison, my bad. Harrison is no longer in the NFL. He's with the Browns. A lot of mistakes today. But he, no, not Ronnie Harmon, Ronnie Harrison, damn thing. There we go. Okay, so like Taven Bryan, he's ended up in Cleveland. Unlike Taven Bryan, he really hasn't established himself as a permanent starter. He got a shot in his second of 3 seasons with the Browns and that second season of the Jaguars, but didn't really do a whole lot with it. So, yeah, he's a player that when he's on the field, the team doesn't necessarily suffer, but at the same time, not really a guy you want to lean on or leave in a starting position for too long of a time. But that's still saying more than what can be said for much of this Jaguars class, as next up we have offensive tackle Will Richardson. Will Richardson is one of the few players who is... Well, he actually ain't even there anymore. He was actually recently released, spent a number of years as a backup to this team. 44 games played, 5 starts. Managed to get a touchdown somewhere in there, but didn't really manage to establish himself beyond that. And that's about what I expected. I saw this as a backup selection back then, and even with the Jaguars' offensive line not being the best, it still is. He'll be a quality bench rider through the rest of his career, maybe drop down to the XFL or USFL, but we won't see too much of him from there. One of 2 players who's actually... no, it doesn't even look like this guy's still around. Tanner Lee was just kind of a head scratcher. As far as I recall, Jacksonville had a backup to Blake Bortles then. Blake Bortles was seen as at least a tolerable, foreseeable future type quarterback for the Jaguars, and it just made that a mystifying pick. I didn't really see why they picked Tanner Lee. He wasn't really, I would say, good enough to be drafted, even as late as he was. And he just basically sat there, third string, practice squad ride until his career ended. The Wikipedia page says former quarterback, so I would assume he retired at this point. So yeah, that's just a weird pick. Next, we have 7th round linebacker Leon Jacobs. And Leon Jacobs is kind of the interesting one to me in that he isn't in the NFL right now, but I don't think we've necessarily seen the last of him in the NFL, because as we see here, his statistics aren't too bad. He did kind of flub up becoming the starter in 2020, but I would say at this present moment, Leon Jacobs is probably one of the better players in the USFL. Because, there's not that many guys that have this much experience in the NFL down there. For the most part, you've got a lot of practice squad riders, undrafted selections, the never has-beens and never weres of the NFL and some other leagues wind up down there for the most part. No one knows who they are. Liam Jacobs, though, is one of the few who's actually had some playing time in the NFL, and that could quite potentially set him head and shoulders above the others when the USFL's second season begins in a few months. So we'll continue to keep an eye on him. I don't really think he's ever going to be an NFL superstar, but he might be a player some people come to know still. And then finally, we have the current Jaguars starting punter Logan Cook. And this is basically just indicative of this draft. When somebody has the most to say about a punter, a draft was not good. And I have the most to say about Logan Cook compared to everybody else in this class, which isn't good for the Jaguars. This class sucked. And we'll now go over here to last year's punting statistics. And we'll start to kind of take apart Logan Cook as a player, because I did a little look. It kind of looks to me like there are some Jaguars fans that are still under the impression that this guy's somehow one of the better players on the team. I don't see it. And we see, from the drop, top 3 in punting average. That's not bad. You have the leg to get it down the field, and this is a lot more than I expected from him, because when he came in the league, his college average was about 7 yards shorter than that. So he obviously saw that as a problem as well, and worked on it. The problem that we see, though, with Logan Cook is in pretty much all other categories. There's it's, let's say, what the basic be-all of punting statistics. Punts down inside the 20. He is outside the top 15 or so on this list. He only managed that 24 times. You've got these guys in the 30s doing that. And, admittedly, most of them are getting a lot more chances than Logan Cook was last year, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. But just across the board, it just doesn't look particularly great. The special teams isn't giving up anything on returns, so there's that. But I wouldn't necessarily say that Logan Cook is an absolutely instrumental part of this team. And technically, you don't want your punter to be a massive part of your team, because that usually would imply your team's doing pretty fucking badly. But at the same time, I think that Jacksonville could probably upgrade. There is, I think, a little bit of room for an upgrade. So, overall, back when I first did this class, I very erroneously gave this an A. I thought a lot more of these players would be starters, permanent starters, before too long. So far, only a handful of them are. There's only one player still with the team, and he's the punter. Like I said, if the Jaguars, like 3 years before, between 2017 and 2021, are a pretty good case study in why the Jaguars turned from a team that almost won a Super Bowl into one of the worst teams in recent memory. That was just overall bad management. This class goes down from an A to about, I would say, probably a D-. There just wasn't very much that benefited the Jaguars in this class. Most of what's good is either their punter or now going to benefit for other teams. So, this very poor class overall. So, that is going to do it for this video. So, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, ring the notification bell, and I will see you tomorrow for the 2018 Tennessee Titans draft.